Hello, which camera do I look at? There you go. That top one. Welcome to another episode of R-Rated Christianity, guys. Those of you that watch us on a regular basis, thank you for being here. Those that are newer, they're going to watch this later on, welcome. I hope you enjoy the conversation and the podcast. This is an apologetics podcast. It comes from the Greek word apologia, to give an answer, a defense, truly a defense for the position and the worldview that we have, the arguments that we have, the principles that we're supposed to live by. And that's what apologetics stands for. So this is a podcast that hopefully helps people think through why are you a Christian? Ultimately, these are the two questions everybody has to answer. Why are you a Christian? And what does that mean? Because then what? So if you say I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, okay, great. Now what? What does that mean? What does that look like in your marriage? What does that look like in your work, in your business, your profession? What does that look like in your parenting, in your friendships? As you being a citizen of this country or a citizen of the state you live in? What does that look like when you're going through a shitstorm in life and you don't know what to do and your emotions are building up? What does it look like when you gain success in life, worldly success, and how do you handle that? Do you do that well? So for us, we believe that the biblical worldview and the idea of heaven and the fact that God is real, and we're going to talk about that tonight, affects the way we look at everything. It affects the lens we look through. Gives us what we call spiritual LASIK surgery, where you can't take off your contacts, you can't take off your glasses. It's just the way you think now. You have this renewed mind. Scripture talks about that in Romans 12:2, that you're born again, right? That you have a renewed mind, and that means you have hopefully renewed thinking and renewed behavior, ultimately, because your behavior is a reflection of your thoughts and the way you think. That's essentially what happens. So that's kind of a rundown. We talk about everything, from politics to theological issues and topics to things that the church doesn't want to handle as a whole, questions that people have about Christianity. And we love to engage with atheists, agnostics, Hindus, Buddhists, Islamic people, Shintoists, agnostics, but just be able to answer why we believe what we believe and why it's credible and logically consistent, empirically adequate, meaning there's evidence behind it, and experientially relevant, meaning that it matters in your life. It's not just theory where it's just, that's nice to think that way. And it's nice to live that way because it's actually relevant in your life, in our lives. So that's the rundown. Did I miss anything? No?
No, sir.
So we're going to talk about, does God exist? This is
Can I read a quick comment?
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's all right, Dan.
Just funny, Valerie says, I hope you all have portable AC units in that garage. It's hot.
It's hot as shit. No, we don't. We have, if you hear some noise, we have a bunch of little fans. Hopefully in the near future, we're doing a kind of an extension building project in our home, and we made the decision to kind of expand that and do a little studio and an office for me. So God willing, in about another 40 days or 45 days, who knows? You never know with construction, but we're on the path and we see an end in sight. We'll be in a air-conditioned or heated in the winter.
Good.
So we're going to retire the gypsy garage because we're like a bunch of gypsies over the years. If you go back, we were in this studio and that studio and this mortgage company and over here in this office building. And Saulo's office in his living room, we first started. Him and Edith were gracious enough to open up their door.
Started from the bottom.
And then, tell that to Saulo. And then we ended up in this garage. And here we are, sweating when it's summer, and then shaking, shivering a little bit when
Humble
it's
beginnings.
But it'll be good. But thank you. We have some fans blowing, but they suck. So the foundational issue is, and look, and I talk to a lot of people in my profession as a lawyer, when I was in politics, especially when I was in politics, and I got the opportunity to really get in and talk about people's thoughts and their minds and how they wanted to do life and how they wanted their community to be and their opinions. And I know it's an overused term, but the dinner table conversations, things that you talk about in your living room, drinking your beer or drinking coffee or water, whatever you do. It's what do you think about? And I love to dive deep with that. And one of the questions, I think the foundational questions, when at least me, as someone that hopefully represents God well and is always trying to advocate a biblical worldview, is, does God exist? Because if God exists, then that designer, that author of life, as we've always said, we think would make up the rules. He's the manufacturer of this thing called life. And it really comes down two ways of thinking. I think foundationally, and we're going to kind of get into some of these, and I'm going to pull George in here because I mean he actually did extensive studying and research and advanced education on this. But I engaged in this. I'm in the trenches literally every week, and it was almost daily back when I was in politics. But talking about worldview and how you see the world, what determines your definitions of right and wrong, good and evil? Is there even evil in the world? And if there is there a counter good to give you that standard to compare to find out if there's evil or not? All these questions are a little bit philosophical. They end up being biblical and theological. But regardless, they shape the way you look at the world and everything. So do you believe in intelligent design, or do you believe in natural selection through random mutation, like evolution and chance, and that there's no intelligent designer that stands outside of time, space, and matter that started all this stuff called life? And of course, it gets into scientific discussions. George and I don't avoid those. We actually embrace them. We love them. We've talked about Genesis. Everybody loses their shit in Genesis, in my opinion, especially religious folks and people believe in young earth, and I'm not being disrespectful, but I'm just going to get that out there. And you get into these discussions, but it really comes down to, do you believe in God? Do you believe in intelligent design, or do you believe in just randomness? That things just happen by chance? That all this design and specificity is by chance? I mean, and then you have to have an explanation for each one of them. Is there an explanation for the way you think? And it really can't just be because someone else said so. It's got to be logically consistent. We always talk about that. And backed up by evidence. And then practical. Does it apply in your life? So that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we wanted to talk about, there's 4 areas that we want to eventually explore. But we wanted to talk about the cosmological discussion about God or not. Can we have a cosmological...
The universe discussion?
Yeah. I'll have George explain that. So what do we mean by that, George? So we're going to talk about cosmological and teleological, and we'll define what both those means. Those are fancy words, kind of. Cosmos, you can figure what that means, right? Stars, universe, all that stuff. And then teleological is a little bit more difference, but it's more specific, and it
has to do with the fine-tuning of those things.
Fine-tuning and the design and the... I call it the fine...
The intricate nature
brush.
of the universe.
Yeah, you have a big paintbrush that gives you the base and the background, and you fine-tune your painting. And that's the kind of the analogy of the teleological. But we're going to try to address those tonight. These are the discussions, believe it or not, that are being had in colleges and amongst young people. And I found that to be true. George can give you statistics. But when you look at 75 to as upwards of 85% of Christian children, young adults, that are sent off into non-Christian settings, and you wonder, how the shit does 75 to 85% of them walk away from Christianity and give their parents that call? I don't know if I'm really believe that anymore. I'm more spiritual or more this, and you ask.
Unfortunately, they're not better off at many Christian universities as well.
That's fair enough, Jordan. Thank you for saying that. That's fair enough.
Who's influencing whom?
But what is the discussion that we think it surrounds around? And it's a discussion about origins. It's a discussion about the universe and cosmological discussions and design and Genesis. And here's the deal, because if we don't get Genesis right, then they start questioning Jesus. Well, you're wrong about Genesis. You're probably wrong about Jesus, because it's all part of the same collection of books. And so let's just kind of dive in, George. When we talk about cosmological arguments about the universe, discussions about the universe.
Yeah.
Pick it up from there. I mean, so let's talk about the counter argument. What does the agnostic or the atheist person say about the cosmos, the universe? Because people use the word universe, and you might have seen this. Well, release that into the universe. The universe has said this. The universe is leading me this way. They label it universe, but they really are referencing a godlike deity or entity, but they don't want to call it God or Jesus or whatever creator. They want to call it universe, but they're giving it godlike characteristics.
Karma. Where do they get the concept of karma from? Doing good to others and it will return to you. Where does that come from?
Right, I get these are all biblical concepts that are stripped of the title, and definitions are changed. But
it's interesting that those two things are logically inconsistent. The idea of an eternal universe, and this is, you asked the question, what does an atheist think? I'd like to start by talking about what we say, which is supported by the scripture, and then what an atheist comes back with, which is, usually a intellectually honest atheist, I think, is is willing to admit that, in fact, the universe had to have had some sort of cause. That's really what's at issue here. Does the universe have a cause? And a lot of atheism, Nico, doesn't believe that the universe has a cause outside of itself, which is interesting. They almost give, like you said, the universe this almost godlike status, where it's been existent forever and it doesn't need an explanation. The universe gets this kind of special dispensation. And that's a problem, because the cosmological argument says, and I think it's the most irrefutable, solid argument for the existence of God, because it deals with the universe. There's other arguments. You mentioned teleology, which talk about the fine-tuning of the universe. We'll get to that in just a moment. But the cosmological argument says that everything that exists has an explanation for its existence. Now, two types of explanations, either in the necessity of its state. Either the explanation resides in the fact that that is a self-existent entity, like we would say God is, because by definition, God has no cause.
He's the uncaused first cause.
Exactly.
Right.
He just simply is. So either the explanation for the existence is rooted in the necessity of its own nature, or there's an external cause. That's the first premise, that everything that exists has an explanation for its existence. Virtually every philosopher and scholar would agree to that. What follows from that is, okay, if that's the case, then if in fact the universe has an explanation for its existence, then that explanation is God. And that's the part that gets controversial, and that an atheist would kind of defend against. But the defense isn't solid, because here's the issue. They are willing to assign this almost godlike status to the universe. The problem is, if you define a universe the way you should, the whole thing collapses. What's the universe? How would you define the universe? This is where the rub is. The universe is the sum total of space, time, including all matter and energy. And let's emphasize the word all.
But
all.
Some, meaning that there's a total, that there's a beginning of it. It's not infinite, because that was the argument.
Well, that's the problem. Right? If the universe is in fact the sum total of all physical reality, all matter and energy,
then it can't be godlike.
Then it can't be godlike.
Right.
And so you can't say that there's some sort of state of affairs outside of the universe that's also physical, because we just said the universe is all that is physical.
Just for people to understand,
what's the deal?
also, for people, don't forget
You
your
first,
thought.
you first.
Don't forget your thought.
Go ahead.
But the argument for years, and I believe even Einstein believed this, but for years people thought that the universe was just infinite, didn't have a beginning.
Well, that still persists. Whenever you say there's no explanation for the universe, you can't expect me.
That's before the 1920s. Basically,
there's still people that still argue that.
No,
now.
there still are.
Well,
sure.
that was the mainstream belief, right? Before like the 1920s,
Indeed.
it was universe is infinite.
That the universe simply is. And there's a lot of pantheistic religions, I would note Hinduism, that would argue that the universe is what it is. It's simply been in existence. And by the way, this is why it's logically inconsistent with the belief of karma. Because if the universe is self-existent and eternal, then how the hell does a karma cycle begin?
Yeah. How does it do good for you?
I mean, if you have negative infinity and positive infinity, at what point would something or some entity have done something wrong to create this kind of cycle of cause and effect? There is no cause, because the universe is infinite. So the karma argument and the notion that the universe is eternal collapse on each other. They don't work, right? You have to have an ultimate beginning to actually have a karma concept.
Well, but this is where we
cause and effect.
We're not going to go. We're not going to go down this road tonight. But
Which
the
road?
whole Big Bang Theory. I mean, that is something that obviously is there. It's a scientific theory, and they call it Big Bang. I'm sure but there's...
Yeah, the Big Bang isn't a cause, it's the first effect.
It's the first effect,
Yeah.
but as other people have said, I'm borrowing somebody else's phrase, if there's a Big Bang, then there's a Big Banger, right? Then there's someone that did the banging and that started it outside of time, space,
Sure.
and matter. So what the Big Bang Theory is saying is, because we know that the universe is expanding, which scientifically we know that we know that the universe is expanding, you can extrapolate that back to a specific time in the past where time, space, and matter ceased to exist. And you can extrapolate
But you
that
can
back.
see it. You can
Well,
see
that's
it
what I'm
through
saying.
redshift
and
technology.
that was
through-
Dr. Einstein and Dr. Hubble, right?
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
how they noticed that
That's
initially.
right. Einstein had seen these realities in his mathematical work. So in the special and general theory of relativity, one in 1905, the other in 1915. And he could see, and this is where we get the concept of forces and constants, gravitational constants, cosmological constants. These are things that show up in mathematical representations of what's going on in the universe, okay? So he started seeing these realities in a form of forces and constants. And then the conclusion was that at some point in the finite past, although not recently, at some point...
Not 10,000 years ago?
No, not 10,000 years ago. Okay. At some point, you saw all of matter and space and energy and the forces that engage with those things, or that involve those things, or that explain those things, the laws that explain those things, the constants that fall out of those laws. At some point, it had a birth date. At some point, it began. The spatial volume condensed to zero. That's the language. And this was mind-boggling to him because immediately he had to conclude that at some point there was actually a beginning. And for people who don't understand what the Big Bang Theory is, real simple. At some point, and all of the calculations and all of the data, and we have 100 years. It's probably the general theory of relativity is probably the most well-attested theory out there.
Ready.
13.8 billion years ago.
So 14.3, right? Somewhere in there? 13.8 is more accurate.
Yeah, it's circa plus or minus 100 million.
But 13.8 billion years ago.
That's what I would say. How do you know that?
Is when the calculations show that I know you can. That when the universe began, after you extrapolate back and you do the number, you can see that, right?
Yeah, we can see there's something called redshift, galactic redshifts, and we have some very powerful Hubble telescopes with spectrophotometers on the end. These are things that can actually read light, so you can see light in the far reaches of the universe, and light is both a particle and a wave, and waves have peaks and they have troughs, and there's distances, and then you can do an S sub x is equal to V sub x times t, right? Which is distance is equal to velocity times... No, hold on, hang in there with me. It's distance is equal to velocity times time, and all this stuff is baked into this technology. We can actually see how far out that light goes. And so we can see distant galaxies, right? And so if you know the distance and you know the speed of that light, you can calculate what?
Extrapolate it back.
Time. Yeah. So anyway, without getting into the weeds of that, the point is we know that we're right around 13.8 billion years ago. All right, what happened then? The argument is, and all of the data coalesces around this issue, that all of matter, all of radiation was infinitely compacted. Imagine the entire universe, Nico, compacted into the size of a soccer ball.
Right.
Now you can imagine the kinetic energies that are building up as a result of that, right? The potential energy that ultimately becomes kinetic. So you have this infinitely hot, right? Think about that. What is it? 100 million
Kelvin or something.
Yeah, it's something like 100,000 million centigrade. It's insane, like 10 to the 11th. And it's infinitely hot, and at some point it exploded, and the universe has been expanding since then. And when we look, and this is what Hubble brought to the argument in 1931, when he could see out his earliest version of the Hubble telescope, he could see what was called spindle nebula in the far out reaches of the universe. And he could see this kind of, they were expanding, they were moving far away in a conical shape from basically where the Earth is, right? So the universe has been expanding since its inception, right? And it's absolutely fascinating that we can determine how long ago that was.
Yes.
We understand so much, and yet we understand so little.
Yes.
But the bottom line is that there was a beginning. Well, and that's in Genesis 1:1.
I was just going to say that, but that's even the bottomer line, or the more bottom line, or the underneath of the bottom line, is that it sounds eerily like Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created. And as we've talked about before, in the Hebrew, it's ex nihilo, from nothing. There's a difference between creation and making something. You don't create a cake. Nobody uses the terminology, I created a cake yesterday. You say, I made a cake. I made dinner. That means you took existing ingredients and you put them together to make a different product or a different result. But creation is creating from nothing, ex nihilo.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that the Hebrew uses that word, ex nihilo, from nothing, a creation. And
so it's Bereshit in the beginning, Bereshit bara. That's the word.
That's
Elohim.
That is creating ex nihilo, literally out of
from
nothing. Bereshit bara et Hashem. Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning God, et ha'shamaim. That's the sum total of the physical universe.
Yes.
That's what that means.
Yeah.
The sum total of the physical universe as we now know it. Think about that. That is a loaded philosophical statement that has scientific implications.
Well, science is caught up to that.
It's a theological statement. I want to be clear, but it has scientific
everything that we know. Every painting has a painter. Every building has a builder. Everything that we know of, even if the painter died 500 years ago, we know there was a painter of a painting. We can see that without actually seeing the actual person doing it. I think what I'm trying to say is, breaking it all down, is why is it we're okay with everything having a creator or a designer in the world, but when it comes to outside of that, people don't want to.
There's two classes.
Go there.
There's two classes. Nick and I were chatting about this earlier. There's the contingency. You're talking about contingent explanations. So Nico LaHood, his existence is contingent on the existence of his mom and dad, whose existence is contingent on the existence of their parents. Those are contingent things. Any object in the universe has a contingent cause. Every philosopher, a mathematician, every physicist, any biochemist, any chemist would be able to would concur with that. In fact, that's how science is built. Scientific inquiry is built on the presumption that there are contingent causes. It's a contingent universe. What's interesting is that atheism philosophically tends to assign this special dispensation to the universe, where they say, well, except for the universe.
Yeah.
And so the argument is, why does the universe get an exception?
But Jeff asked the question, and you asked the question together. I think the bottom line is, because then if we accept the fact that there's a designer and there's an author of life, then it would only make sense that we have to follow the owner's manual of the manufacturer.
But God is the exception.
No. I'm just saying that's why they fight it. That's what I'm just saying.
No, that's right.
If
The
they acknowledge
conclusion is
him, then they have
so,
to.
Yeah,
but let's
then
follow that out.
They can't do life the way they want to do life, because everybody we're designed and created to follow a God. I'm telling you, I've had this discussion.
So let's follow that. Let's continue with that, though. So we mentioned the first premise about everything that exists having an explanation for its existence. And there's two different classes. We said either in a necessity of its own nature, like God, or in some other external cause, like Jeff was talking about, something with a contingency. The second point is that if the universe has an explanation, that explanation is God. Okay, that's controversial, but not for long. Well, the universe exists. We know that. Therefore, the universe has an explanation for its existence, because we just said everything that exists has an explanation for its existence. Right? And therefore, two conclusions. And therefore, the explanation for the universe's existence is God. So what the atheist says is that, wait a minute, I don't concur. I think that there's no explanation for the universe. And so then you have to encourage the atheist, if not force them, to define the universe. If the universe is the sum total of all physical matter and energy, then how can the universe, it seems logically inconsistent, how can everything in the universe have a contingent cause, but the universe itself, which is physical in nature, has a inherently self-necessity cause? That doesn't make sense. So this is where you find that logical fallacy. If the universe is in fact the sum total of the physical matter and energy, then the universe has to have a cause. But what is that
George,
cause?
They're not gonna engage in that level. We know that, because they can't. Because any argument that is, I mean, literally, we've talked about this before, and I think we brought it up in one of our
circle.
And they don't.
It's a self-defeating circle.
Right.
And we're not even getting into morality and definitions of right and wrong, and we're not there at the teleological side of it yet, the discussion. We're just talking about cosmological kind of topics right now. But in the end, it's a self-defeating problem that they have.
It's an internal inconsistency.
Right.
And so they're forced to conclude that the cause is an external, transcendent, right, unembodied, intelligent mind. That's where this goes.
But see, that's the difference between being skeptical and cynical. A skeptic says, I have real questions, but if you present me with truth, I'll conform to the truth. But I'm gonna push back with logical questions, with sincere questions. But when faced with the truth, Doubting Thomas was a skeptic, so they called him Doubting Thomas. But when he saw the resurrected Christ, he conformed to the truth, and then he was one of the church fathers and died for it. But a cynic is someone that no matter what you present to them, the truth could hit them in the head. They're still gonna deny it. They're cynical. They're not gonna conform to the truth, because no matter what, if you walk on water, they'll complain that you can't swim. No matter what, and that's what we're seeing today. A cynical mindset. Does that make sense to you? And so you're not gonna get everybody there. But I think what's important about this discussion, George, for people of a biblical mindset and Christians, they need to be able to engage at least at the basic level here and know, and hopefully it encourages you to that strengthen your faith. Because it's not just because I said so. I was talking to a dear friend of mine who was a young Catholic. He was raised Baptist. He leans kind of, his instincts were agnostic. I think the way he was raised pissed him off because there was some shitty Christians around him, hypocritical Christians, just shitty Christians. I don't know how to say it. They turned him off. And I always encourage people, don't judge an ideology or an idea by its abuse. Judge it by its ideals. Like, how should we be doing something, not by somebody abusing whatever that idea or principle is. And so we were discussing all these issues, and he had some real questions with it. And these questions and these doubts promulgated to his whole worldview, and it really pushed him away from Christianity. And many of these questions were here. And I just said, look, let's just follow the truth wherever it leads us. How about that? And so that's what I encourage people to do, is you have to know if you're dealing with a cynic or a skeptic, number one. Understand what the purpose is. But Christians should be able to, and let me get to the point that I was making about my friend. He said, my faith doesn't have to be logical. I've made a decision to believe. And I said, but you don't have to. I get it. We're not going to know everything. At some point, Ephesians 4:15 kicks in, and I'm walking by faith, my level of persuasion, not by sight all the time. We're not going to know what God knows. I get that. And we're not supposed to. But he gives us a mind, as George has always said, it's a tool of worship. Matthew 22:36, love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind. So why love God? Why love God with your mind? Why does he want your mind? Because Proverbs 23:7 says, as a man thinks, so he is. You'll never live beyond what you believe. And so I think it's important for Christians, at least at a basic level, to be confident that we're not just goofy little pricks.
Yeah.
They just say, I believe this just because. Well, yeah, I believe God. I'm not going to know everything about God, and I trust him even when I don't know what's going on and why he's doing it. But I'm convinced, as Paul said, I'm persuaded by the evidence that is presented to us. And when you look, and it's a beautiful marriage, as George has mentioned many times in our seminars, and people like Hugh Ross and Dr. Stephen Meyer, and a lot of scientist Christians, it's a beautiful merging. Just science and our faith truly merge together. And when people make the stupid bullshit argument, and it's bullshit argument, they pick your faith or science. You can't have both. They're always arguing about Genesis.
Choice,
it's always about Genesis. It's not about anything else. It's not even about the resurrection. It's about Genesis. That's the issue. It's always about that's the only thing they're talking about when they bring up that argument. That's right. When you say, well, no, if I'm properly handling Genesis and we're following the evidence wherever it leads us, and I don't try to mold God into my image and make Genesis what I want it to be. Let's just let it be what it is and read from it, right? Exegetically, not eisegetically, read into it. You're standing on truth.
No,
God is truth.
There are no contradictions. And
None.
I think I was thinking about the resurrection as you were saying that. And if you can believe that a transcendent, all-knowing, all-powerful God created the entire cosmos.
Oh yeah.
Then the resurrection becomes
easy.
Yeah,
no biggie.
It becomes a non-issue,
Lennox,
right?
No.
Said it to Christopher Hitchens.
No,
it's interesting. It's fascinating. Raising the dead, control over the elements, control over life and death. Fascinating, unbelievably amazing. But it pales in comparison to a God who can create the universe
out
like
of
he
nothing.
has.
That's the question.
And teleologically, in a way where the initial conditions are so complex and so specific, meaning that they can enable and sustain life. That is the true miracle. Yep. The resurrection is absolutely miraculous, but it pales in comparison, it seems to me, with a God who creates the universe that we have.
The example I heard, it was Hitchens versus John Lennox, and he basically says, well, you believe Jesus turned water into wine. How silly that sounds. And he's like, well, it's not really that big of a deal, because if Jesus is God and he's the author of time, space, and matter, then turning water into wine is no big deal.
No, the way it was presented, that I heard, that it really resonated with me. And I like to give credit where credit's due, and I can't remember who said this, but they asked a question to the audience. It was a panel discussion. What's the greatest miracle ever that we've ever seen? And everyone said resurrection, and virgin birth, and all that stuff. And they said no, creation, creating everything from nothing. From literally nothing. Creating everything, all this specificity, design, everything from nothing, not from something, from nothing. And if that happened, and you believe that happened, and then he brings in the Big Bang Theory in a roundabout way, he didn't say it as directly as we do, but And he says, so science has just justified the greatest miracle ever known to mankind. The greatest miracle, everything, creation, everything from nothing. Then nothing else compares
Atheists
to
have
that.
changed the definition of nothing too, by the way.
Well, they have to.
They have to.
There's actually, what is it called now?
Yeah, Larry Krauss.
Krauss, that's him.
Dr. Larry
He's a
Krauss.
weird looking
Krauss,
dude,
yeah.
man.
He's a
What a joke.
That guy looks a little interesting.
He's a former professor of theoretical physics at the
Arizona.
University of Arizona, and he wrote a book called The Universe from Nothing. So these are the kinds of, it seems to be the kind of mental gymnastics that these guys have to engage in to actually redefine nothingness. Because you see, if you argue, in fact, that the universe is kind of on its own, right? Then, okay, what does that mean? So what does it mean that the universe was on its own? There's no explanation for that. You got to defend why you're taking the universe and kind of putting it in its own corner and saying, don't subject it to the same explanatory rules. So if you force an atheist back to reality and you say, no, you can't put the universe in its own corner. The universe had to have a cause. What if they're still willing to dismiss the fact that God is that cause? They're only left with nothingness. In other words, there's a state of affairs before the universe known as nothingness that created the universe. So then the question becomes, can you give me an example of how nothingness ever created anything? No, I mean, this is a legitimate question.
Right.
How does nothingness ever produce
What is nothing?
anything?
First of all, nothing is nothing.
Okay, and that's where Larry
Lack
Krauss
of-
picked,
lack
and that's where
of
Larry Krauss
anything.
picked up.
Right.
He decided to term subatomic particles, and he gets into particle acceleration, that kind of stuff. Subatomic particles that are just infinitely small, like an electron, for instance, is weightless. So weightless subatomic particles technically classify as nothing. No, they don't.
Yeah.
There's something. Oh, you can't see it. I got it. But the idea that it's nothing is moronic.
But wait, hold on. But
So these are-
But even the second part of that,
It's a gimmick.
Even in his little gimmick and his little charade, but then what took all those subatomic particles and turned them into everything?
Okay, so this is where we get into fine tuning. So
Right.
here's the basic
He says
argument.
gravity.
Good transition.
This is where we
Lawrence
get into
Krauss's
physicalness.
gravity
This is
does.
where we hold on.
Where did
Whoa,
gravity
whoa,
come
whoa! This is where we're going into necessity, chance, and design. And that's you were asking about it earlier.
I know.
I was trying to think of a way to break it out too, and I think I got it. So he would say it's physical necessity. What are you talking about? It's finely tuned, but okay, it is what it is. Shit was there, and life had no choice but to come out of it. That's the necessity argument. It was absolutely necessary with these ingredients in place. It was absolutely necessary for life to result. And what he's missing is that necessity isn't sufficiency. Yeah, those things are necessary. It's important to have helium. It's important to have hydrogen, right? When you look at things like precision, strong nuclear forces are a very particular number. You deviate from that number, guess what? Your hydrogen content gets off and you're screwed. You can't have water anymore. You start to burn stars too hot or too slow. The universe begins to collapse. Okay, weak nuclear forces, absolutely finely tuned. You jerk with that a little bit, helium gets thrown off, stars can't burn, you can't produce heavy elements, there goes the universe. Okay, then you start manipulating things like gravitational constants. What if the gravitational constant deviates slightly more? Then stars start collapsing, right? They have no explanation for dark energy. Why is it expanding? It's a specific number. We know what the number is, but we don't know why. To this day, we have no idea why the universe is expanding. We have zero clue. We just know it's precise. There's this precision. So the question becomes, okay, it's necessary for it to be that precise, is what they say. Of course life resulted, Nico, because when you have something that precise, life has to result. It's necessity. But what they're missing is necessity isn't enough. Somebody, like you said, something had to come along and organize those ingredients in a way that facilitated the creation of life.
Something is not necessary on its own.
It wasn't random. It wasn't random.
Someone designed it to be necessary.
Right.
Right? I mean, if something's necessary for a car to work, there's design to that. So, I mean,
Well,
it's
you could
an
say
argument
it's
that falls
something,
on its face.
but you would also have to say it's intelligent. Because if it's
Well,
not
sure.
intelligent, then it's random.
That's right.
So this is where we get into probabilities. What is the probability that random, unguided, materialistic forces could somehow just kind of jerk these things into almost infinite order? And those numbers are there's people who have done lots of work on this, like William Dembski, for instance.
Trillions and trillions. I mean, it's impossible.
Or Roger Penrose at Oxford University, who said that it's like something like 1 to the One in a trillion, 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 trillion,
The
trillion.
100th.
Yeah, like 10
That a
trillion.
cosmological constant, which basically is the constant that explains why the universe is expanding the way that it is and allowing life to be sustained. That's it. 1 in a trillion, 10 times the probability that would happen randomly.
But the issue, the bottom line
all
is
over the
bottom
place,
line
man.
is this: is these people ultimately have more faith than we do, because I mean, when you think
It's
about
a stretch.
when you think about that, they truly believe that everything came from nothing, and specificity came from randomness. Nobody would believe that, and that was the example I gave to my buddy the other day. I said, if you give me 1,000 junkyards. Forget about how the junk got there. Forget about the rubber, the plastic, the wires, the plastic for the face, whatever the ingredient. Forget about all of that. The tubing, air. Forget about it's all there in the junkyards. And you can give me millions of years and thousands of tornadoes. There's no way that's going to design a Ferrari.
Right.
You would think I'm crazy. The Ferrari's too specific. It's too specifically designed, necessity-wise. There's too many. The human body, and there's trillions of cells in each human body. And
I want you to
more
listen to what Nico just
interesting.
said, because this has been brought up, and I want you to understand beyond that, because it's an important statement. What people will say, or what an atheist would say, or a materialist would say, is that, Nico, you can't use the tornado analogy because those are not living systems. The universe consists of thousands of complex physical and biochemical reactions.
But
That's not a tornado. Hold on, let me follow up.
That makes my
And
argument better.
And so the argument that, in other words, they would say it's gravity. Okay, you don't need an intelligent creator for gravity. I mean, it's just a force. Hold on. So the question then becomes, ask back. What exactly is that law? What exactly is that reaction then? What is it? What's the reaction? What's the meta law that somehow marries all of these constants together? And by the way, it's not just the constants, the gravitational constants, the numbers. It's the ratios, the relationships between those constants that are precise. Where's the law? Where's the biochemical reaction? Where is it? Name one paper, one example. It doesn't exist.
But that example, but that counter argument falls on its face. Just because they say something, and it's a soundbite, and they push back, people are like, so that argument makes my argument even stronger. I mean, I'm talking about a
got what you
tornado.
meant.
I'm talking about one
Unguided,
tornado. He's talking
right.
about all these different systems. That makes it even more complex.
Right.
Working together synergistically and coherently to make it all work out. I mean, and we didn't even address where the rubber came from, or the plastic, or the metal, or the air, or all the different ingredients or the different elements that would make a Ferrari. I'm just saying, how do you get them together? So there's two different levels of explanation and design. Forget about, what's the differentiation, George, as we talk about between the alligator and the crocodile and the giraffe, and the specificity of the zebra and the peacock and the tail of the peacock and the design of the human body and consciousness? And these are different arguments we'll pick up in weeks to come. But I'm just saying we're still in the cosmological aspect of it, kind of this overarching space and universe argument that still shows the idea, let's not name the designer, of an intelligent designer. And what explanation best fits that designer and has it as, and it's the Christian ideology. Look, we've said this many times before, and look, whether you like Ravi Zacharias or not, that's where I got it from. There's 4 questions and 4 issues that everybody has to answer, every worldview: origin, morality, meaning, and destiny. You have this, everybody: origin, where do we come from; morality, the definition of right and wrong; meaning, what's the purpose in life; and destiny, where do we go? Everybody has to answer that question. The atheist, Islamic, Hindu, Buddhist, Shintoist, Taoist, all the pantheists, everybody has to answer that question. And when you think about what set of ideas and ideology and worldview merges them all together coherently, where they make sense, that one doesn't just stand by itself, it's truly the biblical Judeo-Christian worldview. And this is part of it. And this is where a lot of Christians felt that we were lacking. I know a lot of Christians that believe let me just ignore Genesis. Can I just talk about everything but Genesis? And then forget about Leviticus. There's too much hard shit in there. Those laws are crazy. And everybody goes to Genesis and Leviticus, and they think they can gut Christianity, and they don't understand the specificity of both of those books. I'm sorry, do you want to say something?
I just wanted to say, like, Catholics, at least I got to give them some credit, because my dad was raised Catholic, and the one difference between him and my Protestant mom was how old the universe was, and and where did how old is is the earth, and when was the creation of Adam and Eve, and it was like I actually had to give props to my dad for, even though he was in a Catholic school growing up, that they did believe, even though we don't believe in evolution. I don't believe it. I know you don't. But the concept of an old earth, and I think a lot of Christians need to just be okay with it. I think a lot of Christians need to just surrender their little golden calf and just be like, it's okay. It's not going to ruin.
They really do, man.
It's not going to ruin.
I mean, it's something that George and I
there's no incompatibility between
none.
older.
But the reason why George and I are
Scripture,
passionate about
much
this,
less the
George,
gospel.
is because this is the hill that we're losing a lot of young Christians on. That's why it's so important to us. And George and I mean, I keep saying I'm working on it, but we're going to be working on this together. I've been thinking about it for years of a talk, and we've kind of given it already, but we haven't yet fully. Before we talk about your Jesus, let's talk about your Genesis. I mean, I'm telling you, Genesis is a hill that unfortunately many young Christians die on because the church is not properly handling it, and they don't train up a young person, in how to and to believe that, wait a minute, there's no false decision, a straw man decision between our faith. Do you have a question? And science.
From Henry Barrera. Do you guys believe God may have created other worlds with life?
Yeah, the multiverse.
Other worlds or the universe?
He said other
multiverse,
worlds.
Multi-universes, the multiverse theory. That's become pretty popular over the last 20 years. It's certainly it's possible. It's implausible because we just have zero evidence of it. This is strictly the stuff of quantum theory and quantum mechanics, and there's just simply no evidence for it. So Planet X remains completely unknown in terms of hard evidence. The idea that you might find a galaxy or a section of the universe that might have some like an elemental makeup, where like for instance, that may be conducive or maybe similar to that of Earth's. We've got a rover right now on the surface of Mars collecting lots and lots of specimens. It's possible that there was a giant ocean inside of Mars, a huge ice shield. Okay, that's a great example of necessity not being enough. So you can find a section of the universe or a planet that has a bunch of elements or ingredients, maybe even heavy metals that are that are necessary on Earth to sustain life or to produce life. But again, those have to be organized. They have to come together in very particular ways, in complex and specific ways. That's the difference between complexity and specificity. Complexity simply says that these things are intricate. They're very detailed. Specificity means that it can actually produce form and sustain life. Okay, so that's a different matter altogether. And we have zero evidence at all of this whole notion of
question we get
universes.
is about
could he? Sure.
UFOs
but we have,
and all
we have
this
zero
other
evidence
stuff.
of it.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't have an issue with it as long as you believe that God created whatever life form out there. There's no evidence of another universe, like George said, but there's over 300 billion galaxies. I don't know why God chose the blue grain of sand in the universe beach of this world, the beach of this universe. I mean, that's the way I describe it.
Well, it just shows how special the Earth is.
Well, I mean,
in God's
you
eyes.
get this one grain of sand that's blue, and then you got this whole beach with all these other grains, and there's trillions and trillions of stars and billions of galaxies, which is factual. I mean, you have to get goofy about it. I mean, I don't know why. I'll ask him. I'll ask him when I see him.
I've got I've got a tough time with it. God can do anything, but do we have any evidence that he is, or any indication that he would? The answer is no. And what we do know about our own universe is that it's actually dying. So the amount of usable energy in the universe is quickly decreasing. You've probably heard it in terms of entropy. So this particular universe right now is actually,
which the Bible also
dying.
talks
It's
about.
dying a very slow death, but it is. And I mean, that's all we know about this universe, and we have just zero knowledge.
It's fascinating.
It's entirely mathematical construct.
So, speaking of otherworldly life, what about the passage in Ezekiel 1 verses 4 through 28? What is God talking about there? Is it aliens?
This is from Larry, by the way.
Yeah, no, brother, no.
Hey, Larry.
There's man, we could literally spend a couple of shows
Is it
just on
angels?
Ezekiel
What's the question?
because
What's the question?
there's so much metaphorical language.
What was the question?
Day age people really have lots of
Ezekiel
questions.
1:428 is it aliens?
Yeah, is he talking about aliens? That a justification?
Well, you want to answer that, or no? You want to talk about it another time?
No, I'd like to talk about it another time because this is where you get into the whole notion.
But we appreciate it, Larry.
Yeah, this is where Ezekiel gets into what perhaps might have been the state of the earth prior to creation. You get into this is where the day age people kind of create this notion that there was this almost earthly war. Satan was kicked out of heaven.
Right.
Fallen angels.
Set up shop on the earth, made a tragic mess out of it. And so then when you get into verse 2 and the earth appears to be a dark, watery sort of hellhole.
Desolate.
No pun intended. It's the result of this cataclysmic effect of bad rule by evil angelic hosts under the guidance of the devil, if you will, on earth.
Sure.
So I think it's an improper reading of the text. The stuff that Ezekiel is preoccupied with is much more practical and much more material. You know, he's dealing with political conflicts, and he's dealing with, as are most prophets, the disobedience of a nation before a holy God. And he is communicating the consequences of that disobedience, at the same time trying to promise good and blessed outcomes if they're obedient. And I think we're misunderstanding some of the metaphorical language. That's the short, long answer.
That's a short, long.
Can I just go back to what you're saying about the universe slowly dying? The awesome thing about the Hubble telescope discovering that the universe had an origin, had a starting point, showed how valid the Bible was to say that there was a beginning. And then also, but then if it has a beginning, then there has to be some type of ending at some point.
That's fair.
Which, again, affirms the Bible.
That's fair.
New heaven, new earth, Scripture talks about it. So it's just interesting how the scientific argument does not have to poo-poo and negate the Bible.
We do. We see that, of course, in Revelation, the end of time, if you will, the end of the universe as we know it. And we see science kind of bearing that out. Yep. There's a lot of what's called supermassive black hole entropy calculations, which measure the total amount of usable energy in the universe. You need energy to have an organized universe. For instance, at the time of the Big Bang, the amount of entropy was really low, which means it was an organized universe, the amount of disorder. It was the amount of energy available to do work and organize the universe was at its maximum state. Got it? And entropy wasn't zero, but it was pretty low. Today, it's the opposite. The amount of entropy in the universe is significant. It's never been higher, and it's getting higher and higher. It's more and more chaotic. There's less and less energy available. There's a budget, an energy budget, and that budget gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Winding down is what
those days had not been shortened.
We're winding down, just like we have a peak, we develop, we mature, we grow, and then there's a wind down in life too.
Yeah, and again, correlation between this eschatological.
But nobody knows what that means.
Jeff loves eschatology. It's study of the future, really.
Okay.
I really do.
Future events.
I believe we are almost there.
Yes, of course. That's right. Line up. It's a long line of people for the last 2,000 years. Within 2 weeks of Jesus leaving, they actually thought it was going to happen.
I understand.
So, you know that, right?
I understand.
So, I think it's neat. I do think it's neat that, and this is where we get into the Bible being rooted in objective reality. I love that.
Can we just talk about that really quick? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Are you going to poo on me?
No, I'm not going
Well,
to try
that's Psalm-
to. I'm not going to try to shit on
Psalm
you. 'Cause
19 verses
I don't know
1
what
through
poo
4.
means. But I'm not trying to shit on you.
Pull that up.
But I'm
please.
just pull it really quick. But I'm just saying this. But who cares when the Earth is going to? Jesus
what I
can't
say.
come back soon enough for me. If he came back
That's what I'm
tonight, I'd be
saying.
happy as hell. I really would. But
I
I'm
look
saying
forward
is
to him.
we get to fight till the bitter end until the Lord does this in our journey. Okay, your turn. You're coming home. We go all the way to the end where He's got to pull me by the belt and say, "Okay, time to come home." We're supposed to do that all the way to the end.
There's so much to do.
Oh, well, it's more for me of the Bible talks about the blessed assurance. The 2 Corinthians talks about it, but the concept of it would be so devastating if you had a family and they didn't know the Lord and you were taken away, but they were not.
But you're not promised tonight. So how do you know how much time you have to talk to people?
No, I don't.
So you got to work every day as if it's your last moment. I mean, you think that way,
Right,
to me,
but Jesus uses that example of the man that keeps watch at his house because the guy who's going to break in the house, if he's not ready for it, he's gonna be caught by surprise. But if he's ready, then he can actually subdue the guy breaking in.
And what about when the
that's what I'm saying.
bridegroom
We got to be
comes
ready.
in? You got to be ready for when the master comes home. And there's a parable when the bridegroom comes through the door. There's another. We just don't know. 1 Thessalonians 4 talks about it, doesn't it?
You better believe it. Sure.
But I think
We've
a lot of
talked about it in
Christians
here
do
a
the
couple
opposite.
times.
They say, "Not my problem. Not my concern." And that's for a generation 500 years from now to worry about. That's what a lot of Christians are doing, unfortunately.
Who says that?
I think
I
that's
don't
an
know.
extremist position. I think it's unhelpful to do that either, to just kind of blow it off. I don't think we should do that. I think we should study it. I think we should be aware of it. I think we should be prepared to talk about it. It's God's revealed word, so it's wonderful.
What do you think about the idea of the heretical thought of I would say preterism? The idea that it all already happened, 80, 70, it's all good to go. Jesus already returned. This is the best it's going to get. Welcome to heaven on earth. This is it.
Well, I think that scholarship dismisses the idea. I think when you look at Revelation, the first three, you know this, I think you know that the structure is really the first 3 chapters deals with events that have already passed. The next couple of chapters deal with events in the present time.
With the church.
And then the latter half of Revelation talks about the events yet to come. I mean, it seems to be clearly structured that way.
Revelation 11 on.
Yeah, the language seems to be structured that way. And the events that are talked about. Some events you could actually, you could actually say, oh yeah, people who would have been reading the letter would have said, oh yeah, I remember that. Others would have been like, wow, this just seems abstract. This obviously hasn't happened. What's John trying to communicate through his dream? But anyway, I want to get back a little bit to this idea of fine-tuning. I love that you can look at any level in the universe and you can see this order, you can see this deliberateness. Yeah. And I love that we don't have time to get into it here, but if you guys are interested in reading, please get as many books as you can by Michael Behe, because he makes this argument very effectively for biological systems. Very effectively. And you see these analogies between a human computer, really, or a computer system, the hard drive, the software, and the hardware, and how cell components are set up. You have this DNA molecule that basically creates this physical structure where information is captured. Right? That's the hard drive.
We have little motors in our cells.
Yes,
that's
the hard
amazing.
Drive. And then the software is where you get into what you're talking about. The software is you have this genetic information, right, that stores basically information for creating proteins, right? That's analogous to a software. It programs commands. And then you have this really cool hardware where you have biological machines like ribosomes who, dare I say, receive the mRNA. But mRNA is actually a good thing in other contexts. So mRNA, comes into a ribosome, which is basically a cell factory. The ribosome sits there and reads and translates this into instructions for putting together chains of amino acids, which build proteins, which drive every metabolic process in the body. How the hell does that happen?
Yeah, just on its own. Look, I'm going to give a simple. This is a simple thing. A reference. If you haven't, I think a good, just simple, basic thing to watch or read is The Case for a Creator by Lee Strobel. I think they do a good job of just giving some basic foundation. If you have nothing, if you've never handled this topic at all, you're not going to win some scholar award, or you're not going to get an A in a professor, some type of collegiate class. But I think it's a great foundational. I think it does a good job. We've taught on it before. We've used it as a teaching model, kind of as a basic outline before, and I think it'll help people.
Yeah, I think that's really a good,
just kind of a good introduction,
video.
right?
I agree.
If you never addressed this before, and it kind of gets the terms. It's an overview. It makes it digestible to people. Because look, I get it. I know some of you people are going like, what is he talking about? I get it, but that's a different level. But most people don't get it. I understand that. When I first heard it, I'm listening like, I didn't pay attention in this class when I was younger. I didn't. And I'm fascinated by it now, and I'm hungry for it even more as I get older. But I just think that's a good entry level.
Except that everything that I said is high school biology, and hopefully everybody's here has had high school biology and had to take a test.
But George, the numbers you were saying.
After you get that book, get Discovering Intelligent Design by Casey Luskin.
Yeah.
Right, and it breaks this. That's very readable.
My poor George.
It's hardly.
My poor George.
I hope not.
Can I
Look,
be the?
Actually, let me get serious about this for a moment. I don't like dumbing things down. I don't. That's not what Nico's doing, by the way.
No, I am doing it. Yes, I am. I deal with
like
juries.
it.
I don't want to do that because you're not dumb. dumbasses.
No,
and
I
I'm
like
done- and I'm
it.
done
I
with that.
respect
That's the
it
point.
because
Then call it something different.
I can't use that language you're using.
Call it
'cause-
something different.
But I can't speak in the same.
I'm not talking down to people. I'm not doing it anymore, and that's not what you're doing. I was trying to
brother,
trying to qualify this because
you've got to make it. We got to make it digestible.
I
That's
didn't
all I'm
say
saying.
you don't make it
That's
understandable,
all.
but you don't start using pink unicorn language either.
I don't remember
I'm
saying
gonna,
that.
No,
I
no,
don't
no.
remember saying that. I'm just saying make it understandable.
Do you want to
Dad,
talk
that's all.
about Can we talk about proteins? Is that too
Do we need
complicated?
to?
Yes, you do.
Okay, well, I don't
mean, it's a
know.
protein.
I
You
don't
talk
know.
about proteins. We talk about nutrition. How come that's okay?
Yeah, I'm just talking about, do we
Right?
need to do that to make people understand that there's design in the cosmos?
Yes,
I don't think so.
because
I don't
it's a-
think we need to
it's-
right now at this level. I'm just
We're not,
saying
but
it
I'm not
depends
talking
on the audience.
If you're talking about biological systems, then it's appropriate to talk
Well,
about a simple protein.
You're talking.
That's all.
You're talking about the intricacy of the human body, for
Yeah,
example.
that's I wasn't talking about the cosmos. I was talking about biological systems. That's why I said if you guys are interested in an example of the complexity and specificity as it pertains to biological systems,
I've
then
seen-
get Michael Behe's books.
Yeah.
Behe. He's a professor at Lehigh University.
I think
And
it's
they're not graduate books. They're high school books. But it's important to understand where this stuff is being argued at the average college classroom. So when Nico says that kids are going into a college classroom and they're losing their faith, they're having these discussions at that level. And if we can't counter at that level, then what are we going to talk about? I don't know. I don't think that's what you're suggesting, that we just
No.
avoid it.
That's right.
But all I'm saying is if your kids are having these discussions, they come home, whether you like it or not,
But
George,
you
but
want to
gotta-
engage them, what are you going to say to
You got to
them?
understand, most people, and you're looking at one of them, has a hard time helping their fifth grader with their homework.
I understand that.
I mean, that's just the reality.
It is.
So either I have to understand that when I'm talking to a jury. So I'm not saying that we
Sure.
don't get there. George
Yeah,
is
but
right.
I've also seen you in the last 5 years.
No, but you've got to
buckle down
But it's
and learn this
how-
stuff.
over
it's
how
a
long?
process. It's a
Over how long?
process.
over the last
5 years. I'm just saying it's a process.
process.
That's all I'm saying is.
I didn't say it was gonna happen
all-
overnight.
All,
I'm
all I'm
saying it
saying
takes
is this.
time,
I'm just
effort, and
saying.
energy.
I think I've seen a good video from Stephen Meyer. He does a great explanation. And George is a big fan of Dr. Stephen Meyer. So am I. And he uses this animation. He talks about the bacterial flagellum. And when
a flagellum. I guess you just lost 80
hold on.
people.
I got that.
I
When you-
agree. You
when
need to
you
talk
say
about that.
flagellum, I'm like, what? If I'm reading about a flagellum, or if I see an animation where it shows me what the flagellum is and how it looks like a motor and how it goes into another cell and then I'm like, oh crap, now I can have a better idea. All I'm saying, guys, is there's resources out there to help you slowly but surely. You're not going to get it right away. To
No, you're
George's
not.
point,
You're not.
But
That's
you
true.
got to start engaging at this and familiarizing yourself with these terms, and just know it'll encourage your faith. And just say, man, our faith explain science and our faith of a wonderful marriage, and it's beautiful, and it'll make your faith even stronger if you.
But
really-
I
George,
agree. I'm just saying generalities are not sufficient anymore to engage effectively in the battle over our kids' hearts and minds. That's what I'm saying. Generalities aren't going to do it anymore, and simply quoting verses aren't going to do it. We don't do that.
I know.
We try to help people through this process. Nico's right. It takes time. You can't do this in a week or two, but you got to be committed to it. I'm just warning you guys, this is where the battle's being lost, so we have to be... Are you listening to what I'm saying, brother? This is really important. The issue is that kids are going away. The first thing that happens is they're told what morons their parents are.
Yes.
Okay? There's a bunch of...
Your pastors are idiots.
There's a bunch of required courses now that you have to take at universities that basically tell those kids that everything you've ever learned up until that point is moronic unless it's woke. And then every classroom, whether it's math or social science or history or biology or chemistry or physics or earth science, is going to have a spin. And that spin is going to be basically grounded in the notion that you are a materialistic outcome of some process.
yes.
Okay? And that there's really no hope beyond the immediate. And when a kid comes home, having now had their perspective on life and reality altered, what is a parent going to say? That's all I'm saying. We have to have something to work with. And there are organizations
least
out there. You mentioned
resources, at
Stephen
least
Meyer.
resources.
Yeah, right. But I mean, what do but by the time they come home, what are you going to crack open the book then? All I'm saying is be prepared for that.
But most parents aren't going to be able to engage. They have to at least direct them. I'm just being I'm a pragmatic. I want to win the war.
I agree with that, because all the people that were drawn to Jesus, I mean, he would use these parables and these stories. He didn't have to make it super deep and complex. He could just use what was kind of something that was understandable on a simple level for a lot of these people to get the overall concept. And the people were drawn to that, and they're not drawn to the teachers, the religious leaders that have the credentials. They're drawn to the guy that didn't even go to school.
That's right. Jesus talked in parables as teaching aids, but that's not all he did.
Correct.
That's the point. He engaged in matters of law, Jeff. And he had to talk, and he often used it as an illustration. Like Nico always says, whenever you answer somebody on social media, it's not just the person you're addressing, it's everybody that's watching. Right. I think Jesus mastered that. He engaged a religious class, and he got into matters of law. He corrected the record, and everybody who was observing was saying, oh, crap, I thought about it that way too, but I guess I was wrong. Those guys are full of shit. In other words, Jesus, it depends on the situation.
Yep. I agree with you. I think what I was trying to say was, for example, like Jesus would give a parable. Even the disciples would be like, hey, can you explain that to us? It's a little bit over our head. Yes. What does the grain mean? And what does the wheat mean? And what is the person that comes and sows this?
Right. That's right.
So I think what you're saying is correct. I'm not disagreeing with that. I think what it is it's expounding upon it by saying, hey, you might not understand it at this level, but let me bring it down just a little bit and say it's like this, and that's what Nico's doing. He's kind of just he's not
but also
taking
too,
away
but
from what
also
you're saying.
Too, you got to understand, we got to get away from the piñata mentality. And those that don't understand what a piñata is, it's confetti, it's a substance that you put together, the structure where you beat it at parties and fiestas and things and candy comes out and kids love it, and it's a very Mexican tradition. But we sit there, it's either punching bag or the piñata mentality where people swing at us and the atheists swing at us. I ask questions back. They have to answer the same questions we do. And I always push back. Right. I was like, so you believe this? No, where are you getting that from? Because we let them off the hook. They make these soundbite arguments backed up by no evidence, and we don't push back. And we just say, and we're the ones on defensive, and we're the ones that always have to have the answer. And just that alone will change the engagement. If you start just asking, well, convince me, ask this question, and they don't have answers.
But you got to have enough in your quiver to ask intelligent questions. Like, for instance, when that's what I meant by 5 years ago, you say natural selection by random mutation. You would never know what the hell that meant 6 years ago. That's my point. Now that matters. Well, wait a minute. I know what that means, and there's problems with that assertion. See, you got to what questions are you going to ask if you don't have anything to work with? That's my point. Parents, church leaders, believers have to be equipped in the basics so that we can recognize when something is being used to mislead, and at least have that bullshit meter pop up to say something's not right. Mm-hmm. I'm not just going to automatically digest this stuff. Something's not right.
Look, guys, this is a lot. I get it. It's a lot. But do you have another question?
Just what resources would you recommend for people who want to amp up on their learning?
Well, I think Nico mentioned Stephen C. Meyer, and he's done a wonderful job at Discovery Institute, putting together a number of resources. Casey Luskin, I think, did a great job when he was with them, and he wrote a book called Discovering Intelligent Design, and he addresses these topics. He addresses the creation of the universe. He addresses the creation of the cell, the creation of complex biological life, and he defines basic terms. And I think he's writing there at about a 10th grade high school level, and it's very well done. And I realize it's new terminology. I get it. It's like anything else, and it's going to take time and patience. But I would definitely. I think that was good advice. Look at the case for a creator on video.
Yeah, just start it off,
and then follow up with Discovering Intelligent Design as a next step. And I think you're going to see where the battle is being won intellectually, because it most certainly is being won, and it's not being won by us right now.
I just think the case for the creator just kind of lets you take a deep breath.
It does.
It just because wow,
gives you hope,
and gives you hope, and then it makes you want to do more.
It's introductory, so
yes,
it just gently
it makes you want to search more.
Yes,
that's all I'm saying.
That's very true.
And it uses good illustrations. I'm a visual guy. George knows
Same
this.
here.
I'm a trial lawyer, so I use visuals to persuade people. Because think about it, and all the marketing studies show you, very few people read things, and they prefer to read than to be engaged with their eyes and their mind and their thinking. So that's the way I learn too, and that's why I like to teach and advocate and litigate. So that's why I like looking at things, and if you can merge great education and discussion with a kind of a visual, like we do our seminars, we use visuals. So the case for a creator, I think, is a great start. Yeah, it's a great start. But look, we can go on for hours.
This is an amazing episode.
Well, thank you. I hope it continues. We're going to follow it up with this because
we'll follow up with a moral argument.
The moral argument is really a deep one, and I think it's just as strong as the other ones, if not stronger. So we didn't even we just touched the surface.
Oh, yeah.
Of
For me, the
cosmological
philosophical is
and
more
material.
interesting.
Yeah, we're just
for me.
scratching.
Philosophical. Well, yeah. Well,
Just
look,
scratching the surface.
they all. But at some point, they intertwine. When you get into a discussion with someone, you're gonna see the issues shift. You'll go from cosmological argument to teleological argument to philosophical,
That's right. They blur.
then moral, and then you're just going to be doing this, and you have
Exactly.
to be able to engage like that.
That's right.
And so, guys, I hope this was helpful.
Yes.
At least as an introductory, look at those references we made. Start with the case for a creator. I think it's well done. Lee did a good job. I think he's been a blessing. And just start there, and then hopefully it wets your beak, as we say, and interests you in wanting to learn more. Hope to see you next week, guys. Have a blessed week, and share this with someone you think might benefit from it. Bye-bye.